What if I told you that Onimai isn't just some weird lolicon pandering show, but actually provides a useful case study in understanding the psychology and origins of Japanese anime manga fandom? Of course, on the surface, this anime is anything but intellectually stimulating. Onimai is weird, extremely weird, and there's no way around that. And the more you think about the premise, the more bizarre it becomes. For the uninitiated, Onimai, full titled Onichan wa Oshimai, or Onichan is Done For, is a lightly controversial anime manga series about a shut-in NEET named Mahiro Oyama, who gets drugged by his younger sister Mihari and is magically transformed into a middle school-aged girl. For whatever reason, instead of patenting her invention that can reverse aging and change someone's sex, Mihari uses her new pharmaceutical miracle drug to save her brother from being a NEET instead of selling it to Big Pharma, which is weirdly wholesome, I guess. As the story progresses, Mahiro adapts to his new body and role as Mihari's little sister. Eventually, he starts going outside and eventually even enrolls in school. Again, perhaps just a little weird. The original manga was actually extremely popular in Japan. A 2020 web poll of what manga readers most wanted to see adapted into anime, Onimai placed 3rd, beating out both Chainsaw Man and Spy Family. A 2021 poll placed Onimai at 7th, just 1 place below Spy Family and barely edging out Gomi-San Can't Communicate. But the Onimai anime has faced, let's say, a troubled debut in the West. Unsurprisingly, the illustrious Western anime journalistic class panned the show. Writers for Anime News Network referred to the show as, quote, pure lolicon garbage and centered on a pedophilic gaze. Another referred to the show as horrific. For totally separate reasons, the show became the center of a minor Twitter controversy over whether the show counts as a kind of transgender allegory. For what it's worth, Mahiro uses the pronoun ore, which is generally seen as a masculine way of addressing oneself. But I want to argue that viewing Onimai as a story about the pedophilic sexualization of young girls, or as a transgender story, is, in both cases, reductive at best. Rather, I want to make the case that Onimai is the product of the specific characteristics and consumptive behaviors of Japanese otaku. Onimai is a story about seeking alternatives, particularly of how what seems to be a problematic attraction to fictional girls is really a way to escape hegemonic norms of sexuality and gender. To unpack what I mean here, we have to start with what otaku are, where the subculture originated, and how that origin is deeply intertwined with an affinity for cute girls, or bishoujo. Most people are familiar with the term otaku as a slang term to refer to someone of an obsessive interest, typically in the realm of anime and manga. The term originates from the Japanese word otaku, which is a kind of formal way of referring to one's home. But the lesser known history of otaku is that the modern image of a person, typically a young man with an extreme affinity for anime and manga, originated with male fans of shoujo manga in the 1970s. Prior to the 1970s, the style of Japanese comics most popular of boys and young men was called gekiga, literally dramatic picture. Gekiga utilized bold lines, sharp angles, and dark cross-hatching to create a sense of realism, the aesthetic antithesis of the soft lines, round shapes, and light shading that are prevalent in modern manga. During the 1970s, while Gekiga began to stagnate and lose relevance, shoujo manga, ostensibly aimed at girls and young women, underwent a major transformation. The largely female shoujo manga artists began to experiment with more complex, mature, and even sexual themes in their work. It's from here that the bishonen, or beautiful boy character, originates. It's from bishonen that the bishoujo characters that are so ubiquitous in modern manga and anime descend. The development of the bishoujo, and by extension lolicon, is most associated with the manga artist Azuma Hideo. While erotic gekiga did exist, Azuma instead took inspiration from shoujo manga, taking the aesthetic trappings of shoujo manga and applying them to the cute, round characters found in the works of Tezuka Osamu, such as Astro Boy. In 1979, Azuma, among other shoujo-inspired male artists, published the fan magazine Cybele, which became most known for an erotic parody of Little Red Riding Hood that Azuma had created. This would kick off what would later become known as the quote-unquote lolicon boom. At this point, it's worth briefly exploring the etymology of the word lolicon. The word is a portmanteau of the term Lolita complex, a phrase originating from the 1955 novel Lolita by Russian novelist Vladimir Nabokov. In the book, a middle-aged literature professor known only as Humbert becomes obsessed with and sexually abuses a 12-year-old girl. Understandably, because of these origins, lolicon evokes highly suspect images of illicit predators and illegal relationships of children in the Western imagination. But in the Japanese context, that association isn't as clear. Consider the subculture of Lolita fashion that is popular in Japan, which is only really related to the Nabokov novel in a perfunctory way, if at all. During the so-called lolicon boom of the 1980s, the term lolicon generally did not refer to older men sexually desiring real girls, but rather a more general affinity for fictional girls that became associated with male shoujo fans. The popularity and reach of lolicon at this time also complicates notions of there being some sort of distinction between upstanding, mature, or serious anime and degenerate lolicon garbage. Shows like Space Battleship Yamato, Mobile Suit Gundam, or Super Dimensional Fortress Macross, which are often held up as examples of serious and mature anime, all feature a cute girl character who became popular with and was often sexualized by fans. Miyazaki Hayao's directorial debut, The Castle of Cagliostro, became extremely popular with lolicon fans, specifically because of its character Clarice. Miyazaki, for his part, hated the fact that his characters were so popular with lolicon fans and publicly expressed his ire at this reality. But the popularity of Clarice among lolicon fans ultimately played an influential role in raising Miyazaki's profile as a director. It's in this context that we say otaku start to take shape as a term for someone with an unhealthy and often dysfunctional relationship with anime and manga. Funnily enough, the modern connotation of otaku originates from the popular lolicon fan magazine Manga Buriko. Starting in June of 1983, Nakamori Akio began publishing a column in Manga Buriko entitled Otaku no Kenkyu, or Otaku Research. In it, Nakamori begins to denigrate manga anime otaku, particularly those with an affinity for lolicon or fictional girls. He describes otaku as failed men, and that their affinity for fictional girls and women over real ones is symptomatic of psychosocial dysfunction, as well as mental and sexual immaturity. He argues that otaku are unable or unwilling to grow up and assume normal adult responsibilities, like joining the workforce and raising a family. And the crux of the problem for Nakamori and his protege, Eiji Sonada, is that otaku have an immature, perverse, and disgusting affinity for fiction over reality. This description brings us back to Onimai and its main character Mahiro. Mahiro is, for all intents and purposes, the pinnacle of this failed man that Nakamori describes. He becomes despondent over his inability to measure up to his genius little sister and becomes an otaku NEET as a result. The fact that literally turning back into a little girl begins to cure him of being a NEET reinforces his contention that otaku are immature and unwilling to grow up. But I'd argue that it's not the becoming a young girl itself that explains Mahiro's improvement in mental state. Rather, it's how this position removes the difficult societal expectations he'd felt burdened by, which is ultimately why I don't think this is meant to be a transgender allegory. There's reference in the manga to how Mahiro and Mihari used to have a very close relationship with each other as kids, but Mahiro slowly closed himself off because he couldn't live up to the expectations of being Mihari's brother, and ultimately felt like he was just a burden on her. I think Mahiro's position as someone who is unable to and uncomfortable with the societal expectations foisted upon him helps to explain why this manga is so popular, especially among Japanese viewers. While a case can be made that the anime in particular sexualizes Mahiro, I don't think that the fan service is really what draws people to the series. I imagine that if you were to ask people why they enjoy reading or watching Onimai, I highly doubt you get a bunch of responses saying that they're in it to get their rocks off to Mahito. Most people would probably say something about how they enjoy the story and how it's fun and lighthearted. But more so, I think that Mahito's pre-transformation dilemma resonates with many readers, which is an underrated reason for Onimai's popularity and surprisingly broad appeal. In the early 1990s, the Japanese asset price bubble popped, plunging the Japanese economy into a deep economic malaise that the country has never recovered from. The bad economy left many young people adrift, unable to find good jobs and start families. It's not a coincidence that it's also around this time, in the early to mid 1990s, that we see the affection and desire otaku show for fictional characters, particularly bishoujo, take off in popularity. While the Japanese economy writ large was struggling, the anime manga industry was booming at this time. One show in particular, the 1995 Neon Genesis Evangelion, transformed the anime industry with its explosive popularity. One of the most concrete demonstrations of that popularity was the reaction to the character of Rei Ayanami. Rei was apparently so obscenely popular and so appealing that Eva reportedly increased the market for character figurines tenfold. One of the effects of Eva was not the normalization per se of being in love with a fictional character, but such feelings certainly became much more common after the show came out. It wasn't uncommon among otaku for their first love to be a bishoujo character, like Rei. Unsurprisingly, this trend would continue into the late 1990s and 2000s, with the development of an entire genre dedicated to the escapades of cute anime girls. In his book, Otaku and the Struggle for Imagination in Japan, the cultural anthropologist Patrick Galbraith, who has basically become the preeminent English voice on otaku and lolicon, describes an interview he did with a man named Handa Toru. Handa suffered with depression and suicidal ideation, finding solace in anime, which he says saved his life. He attempted, unsuccessfully, to quit being an otaku and join normal society. As he explains, loving fictional characters is a low-cost, low-stress way of finding meaning in a society increasingly beset by economic and social woes, where many traditional norms of masculinity and success have become less and less attainable. Handa's story is representative of many other voices that have appeared in Galbraith's work, people who find solace in the 2D world after being alienated from the 3D one. An important point to emphasize is that otaku are not unable to distinguish between reality and fiction, as is sometimes insinuated. The original concern and apprehension towards otaku, popularized by Nakamori's column in Manga Buriko, was that otaku have a perverse and demented preference for 2D women over 3D ones. What I'm ultimately trying to get at is that a preference for 2D anime girls is not necessarily indicative of psychosocial dysfunction, but rather can be an alternative way of approaching sexuality and gender. Bringing it back to Onimai, Mahito becoming a cute girl is symbolic of how many otaku find solace in fictional characters. Mahito is saved from his antisocial lifestyle by literally becoming the bishoujo that he and many other otaku idolize. This idea of saving otaku from their lifestyles is somewhat of a trope itself, even within anime and manga. For example, Welcome to the NHK is ostensibly also about an asocial otaku NEET who is coaxed back into normal society, but the progenitor of this idea was the franchise Densha Otoko, or Train Man, that became extremely popular in Japan during the mid-2000s. Densha Otoko is allegedly based on a true story from the Tech Sport 2 channel. The story chronicles a 23-year-old otaku who intervenes to stop a group of women from being harassed by a drunk man on a train, hence the title Train Man. The Train Man eventually goes on a date with one of the women, known only as Hermes. The popularity of the story inspired something of a paradigm shift in Japan. While the story does perpetuate certain stereotypes of otaku as slovenly and asocial, it reframed the discussion away from notions that otaku are inherently perverse, sociopathic, or dangerous, an image spread by the media in the wake of a series of heinous murders that were wrongfully attributed to anime and manga consumption. At its core, the idea of Densha Otoko is that otaku are just misunderstood men waiting for the right woman to come along. Implicitly, the idea is that otaku can be saved from their lifestyle, and said path to salvation lies in entering into a traditional heterosexual relationship. This is also a theme reinforced in Welcome to the NHK, which follows a similar story beat. In both cases, a traditional heterosexual romance is central to the main character's rehabilitation back into normal society. Onimai takes a very different perspective on this issue of fixing otaku. Onimai is, at its core, a story about a young man who turned into a NEET because of his inability to live up to the pressure society placed on him. While works like Densha Otoko or Welcome to the NHK, at least implicitly, suggest that otaku can grow out of their obsessions and return to a societally acceptable state of being, Onimai seems to imply the opposite. Mahiro, instead of growing up, literally regresses in age, becoming a young girl. But becoming a young girl then frees him from the expectations that crippled his life, eventually allowing him to progressively return to a normal life. The popularity of Onimai is reflective of how that story resonates with many otaku, of how manga and anime provide an alternative way to understand sexuality, gender, and growing up, than becoming a salaryman who works himself to death and starts a family with a wife and kids he barely sees because he's at work all day. One way to read this is that perhaps otaku are just fundamentally immature and maladjusted. Turning into a young girl as a way to escape social realities does seem to reinforce this, but I'm not entirely sure this is the case. In his book Beautiful Fighting Girl, the psychiatrist Saito Tamaki documents his research and understanding of otaku and otaku sexuality. His key argument is that otaku's affinity for 2D girls is not the result of sexual perversion and immaturity, but a result of an alternative understanding of the distinctions between reality and fiction. Saito uses the Japanese term for reality, genjitsu, to refer to what's known as the real world. He then uses the English loanword reality to refer to the perceived reality of fictional worlds. He argues that for otaku, genjitsu is not intrinsically better than reality, and that their attraction to anime girls is precisely because of their fictional nature, not because they resemble real 3D women. In the context of Onimai, I don't necessarily think that most fans of the story literally want to become young girls, but rather the distinct fictionality of the story, particularly in the context of escaping social or economic pressures, is a relatable draw for many fans of the series. Ultimately, Onimai is not a story about pedophilia, and I really don't think it's meant to be read as a transgender story either, though it is popular with many transgender people. Onimai is the product of particular histories and connotations surrounding Japanese otaku. For those who are drawn to anime and manga because they feel alienated from societal expectations they don't want to or cannot live up to. Onimai is an interesting thought experiment in what it would be like to live with those expectations removed, to step into the role of the cute girl that for many provides a reason for being.